Welcome back to the Graeme and Sophia podcast, post British Grand Prix 2023, and what a race it was.
It sure was. I think it was one of the better races of this season.
We were just saying last week how great Austria was, and I think that this might be better than that was.
I think you might be a little biased as to why you think this race is better.
Maybe a little bit biased, but we can talk about that later.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was obviously a great race for a lot of drivers, and I think the season, apart from Max being P1 as always, was shaken up a bit. So I think the next few races left, well, not few, but a handful of races left should be interesting. And I think it's a toss-up. I don't know.
Yeah. Will we finally see someone else get a win?
We'll
find out.
But no, I think we're just all looking at like P2 and below.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I think the McLarens were closer to any team, like to Red Bull, than any other race this season. So
yeah, that's actually one of the notes that I put. Yeah, Lando was leading for like more than a second. Like he had a bigger gap than 1 second at one point from Max. And I butchered the way that I said that horribly, but you get what I'm saying. And I wrote that down because I was like, that's really impressive, because usually if anyone has a lead over Max, if it's a lap or 2 laps, it's for like the distance is less than a second. So I thought that was pretty impressive.
Yeah, so let's do a quick weekend recap. We had pretty good weather for most of the practice sessions. There was a little bit of rain in FP2. And I think the biggest shock coming out of those practice sessions was that Williams looked like the second fastest team, genuinely, which was crazy. And everyone was like saying, like, oh my God, is Albon going to get pole? Is he going to challenge Verstappen? And then, unfortunately, it was interchangeable conditions for quali. And it's kind of been shown that this season, the Williams doesn't do well in those conditions. That being said, Albon did qualify pretty well. He was in the top 10. We also had Checo out in Q1 again, so that's not great.
I predicted that one.
Red Bull.
I predicted that.
You did. You spoke it into existence.
Maybe I should keep going.
Another interesting part of quali was that if Leclerc didn't make a mistake on the second to last corner of his last lap, he would have been P2. And then, of course, Lando and Oscar, P2 and P3. And for like 5 seconds, Lando was provisional pole. And you could hear on the broadcast, the crowd went wild. It was so loud.
I mean, I think for McLaren to show up and not only it be their home race and Lando's home race, I think it was like a perfect storm. Like, the crowd was there, the energy was there. I feel like it couldn't have been a more perfect scenario for McLaren and their upgrades, and honestly for Lando. But
yeah, and also the chrome livery, which a lot of people weren't a fan of, but I think it looked better on track than it did in the initial pictures that they released, and I really think it looked so good.
I also really liked Lando's chrome helmet. I thought it was a nice touch.
Yeah, it's funny that they used to race in chrome liveries, and then they have chrome as a sponsor now, so they kind of have that reason for being able to do the chrome livery.
Anything for their sponsors.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that Zach Brown has done for McLaren since he took over is getting them sponsors. Like, they were not in a good spot financially, and then he brought in like a bajillion sponsors for them.
Yeah, and then they focused a little bit too much on, we can have interchangeable ads on our car.
It is pretty cool, though. The sponsors, I'm sure, love it.
Yeah, I'm sure they do, but I'm sure the drivers were frustrated that they didn't have a better car in the beginning of the season, but they had really cool ads.
Yeah. Yep. That's all the drivers care about, having a cool-looking car, right?
Exactly.
Getting into the race, I think that gotta start with the start, of course, but it was Max P1, Lando P2, Oscar P3, And Lando got an amazing start and was leading the race for, I think, 6 laps. And it was him, Oscar, and Max like slowly pulling away from the Ferraris and the Mercedes behind them. And like you said before, Lando was able to pull over a second, so he was outside of Max's DRS for like 2 laps, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
I think that one of the strong suits of the McLaren is that it's able to get its tires up to temperature really quickly, whereas the Red Bull doesn't. So that's why it was kind of able to build a little bit of a gap. And then, of course, Max eventually got past. And then I think before the safety car, he had a 9-second gap to Lando. So,
which is pretty expected, but I think it was really interesting to see Max, the start of the race, P2. I'm sure he was probably like, what's going on here? I mean, I know he mentioned that his wheels were spinning a little bit off, so I don't know.
Maybe he was just doing a favor for his pal Lando and letting him lead his home Grand Prix for a couple laps.
Honestly, like at this point, I think Max is so confident in himself and the car that he knows that he'll eventually get to first, that maybe that was possible. Maybe they had like a known alliance in the background.
Before the race started, I was like secretly hoping there was some sort of alliance and Max would let Lando go and then just defend from the rest of the field and Lando would win the Grand Prix. But it didn't happen. It didn't happen like that.
I don't think Max would let him win. I think it would be...
Max is too much of a competitor for that.
Yeah. Also, not to take away from Lando's driving. He did great. It was all on him. And the upgrades.
Yeah, plus you wouldn't want your first... Well, I'm sure Lando probably just wants to win, but I don't think it would be the same feeling if Max somehow just let him win opposed to actually doing it on merit.
Exactly.
So, moving on in the race, the Red Bull of Max was gone. Then it was Lando and Oscar were like pretty close the entire time up to the safety car. And then there was, I think it was a 6-second gap to the pack behind them, which I think Leclerc was at the front. Yeah. For whatever reason, after like 19 laps, Ferrari decided to pit him for the hard tire. Or I think he went out to the hard of the medium. But it was crazy because George was right behind him and on the soft and was making them last. And then somehow Leclerc couldn't do it and Ferrari blundered their strategy as they usually do.
Ferrari is going to Ferrari. If there's one thing they're going to do, it's going to be fuck up their strategy. So is anyone surprised?
Yeah. And then before the safety car, Esteban Ocon retired from the race. I don't know if they said what the failure was yet, but he pulled into the pits and had to retire. And then around, I think it was lap 34 or so, Kevin Magnussen, his car just kind of, his engine specifically started to spew Smoke. Fire. Yeah. Another Haas engine failure, which is not a good look for Ferrari. I feel like even last year, Ferrari engines were the ones that were always exploding and catching fire. And they said that they fixed them, but it doesn't seem like it. And then he was retired in the middle of a straight. So they had to bring out, first they brought out a VSC, which didn't really make sense, even though the car was on fire. But then it was upgraded to a full safety car. That caused Max, Lando, Lewis, and then a bunch of other drivers to all box. So Lewis stayed out longer than Charles, Carlos, and George. So that meant during the pits, he was able to jump all of them and was P3 going behind the safety car. So he even jumped Oscar, who would pit before Lando. So it's pretty good from Mercedes to keep him out, just hoping for a safety car, and it definitely worked out for them.
Yeah, I mean, P9, right? He started P9 to P3. I think it was a very good move on their end.
Yep. Mercedes always pulls out all the stops for Hamilton at the home Grand Prix. If there's ever going to be a race where they're going to pull something extra out of the bag, it's going to be the British Grand Prix, for sure.
That's for sure.
So the interesting thing from those stops was that McLaren pulled Lando in, and they were going to put him on hards, when it was still the VSC. So there he thought it would be fine because he would still have that big gap to Hamilton. But by the time that he was going to pit and they upgraded to a full safety car, they didn't, well, according to McLaren, they didn't have time to change the tires that they had out to softs. So he was in P2 on hards with Lewis in P3 on softs, then Oscar on hards behind him in P4, and then George behind Oscar on softs. So I was like freaking out, like is it going to be like an Abu Dhabi thing where the person on soft just flies past on the first corner and just goes off into the distance. And I thought that both George and Lewis were going to get past Oscar and Lando. I was like so confused why McLaren made that call and like so nervous that they threw it away. But it didn't happen. We got to see some great defending from Lando. And because the McLaren's able to get its tires up to temperature so quickly, he was able to stay ahead of Lewis and eventually finished P2. And Oscar, if there were 2 more laps, I think Oscar could have gotten Lewis because he finished less than a second behind Lewis.
Yeah, I think this was a great race for him. I know everyone's like focused on like Lando because it's so exciting, but I think Oscar really, I don't know, I think earlier this season I kind of didn't pay much attention to him. He was just always there and in a McLaren, so I guess the attention wasn't always going to be there. But this race, I was like, wow, like you could really see his skill coming through. I mean, just finishing P4, it should have been P3. I mean, honestly, without the safety car, he probably would have finished P3 for sure. But
so many drivers. Yeah, so many drivers after the race kept saying like, "Oh, I feel bad for Oscar." I think Lando, George, Lewis might have said it. Probably not because he was probably pretty happy with the podium. But Oscar definitely showed why McLaren went through all that effort to get him last year. He's pretty much been like 2 or 3 tenths behind Lando the whole season. But as soon as he's gotten a good car, he qualified like 1.5 tenths behind Lando, and apparently Lando's new front wing is worth a tenth. So he was pretty much right there. Yeah. And during the race, he would have been on for P3 and probably would have been pretty much right next to Lando. So I'm really impressed with Oscar. And I think that if McLaren keeps bringing upgrades and stays competitive, they have a really good driver lineup. Probably one of the best on the grid.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the upgrades really allow the drivers to demonstrate their skills a lot more now that they're in a more of a competitive car. But I thought that was really cool to see and so unexpected. So I think, I mean, I also have a little soft spot for Lando. So I think even just seeing all of that, it was exciting as well. Even though, of course, Ferrari'd. So. Yeah,
at least you were able to root for Lando a little bit. So it wasn't a terrible weekend for you with Ferrari finishing 9th and 10th.
It's like putting a Band-Aid over like a bullet wound. It was okay.
Also during the safety car restart, Lance Stroll and Pierre Gasly were going at it. And Lance Stroll ended up basically breaking Pierre's suspension and forcing Pierre to have to retire the car. So a double DNF for Alpine. Stroll got a 5-second penalty, finished outside the points. So not a great race for Alpine and not a great race for Stroll. It's a little bit disappointing for him, I'm sure. And then, of course, Max won. That's his 11th, or Red Bull's 11th straight win, which is tying McLaren's record from, I think, 3 or 4 decades ago. So super impressive and just really goes to show how dominant that Red Bull is.
Yeah, and I think an important statistic to note here too is Max could place second in all of the remaining races and still win the title. And I mean, we kind of saw this one coming, but that's just so crazy. Impressive. Yeah.
I haven't seen anyone say anything about it, but I want to know how early Red Bull can win the constructors and the drivers. Because I feel like there's a chance that it could be like a record in how quickly that they win both.
Totally agree. I think it's going to be one of the few upcoming races, honestly. I think We saw this one coming though, so it's not a shock. But
Yeah, it will
it's
definitely
just
be after the
impressive.
summer break, but
Yeah,
I think it'll probably only be a couple races after the summer break.
I think something would have to go terribly, terribly, terribly wrong for him not to secure that
Yeah,
title.
he would have to like break his hand and not be able to race for the rest of the season. And then
I think he would still race.
even then he probably could still win because
I think yeah.
behind Max everything else is so crazy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what in his post race interview, they were like, you've stayed consistent in P1, like winning everything. What are your thoughts on like the rest of the grid? He was like, I'm honestly so confused. He was like, there's always someone else there. He's like, I don't know what's going on. And I was like,
Yeah.
honestly, neither do we.
Yeah, I guess I mean, to be honest, he doesn't really need to pay that much attention because he just kind of drives and it's like he's out for a nice Sunday drive most of these races.
I love when it's the end of qualifying and the cars are pulling up to their positions. And he's always so shocked by who's there. You just see his face. He's like, what? Like, what are you doing
Yeah.
here?
Especially when this qualifying was so good because obviously, like I think I was saying last episode, whenever he sees Lando up there, he gets so excited. But he saw
Yeah.
both McLarens, and there's a picture of Lando and Oscar like high-fiving each other, and Max is just in the background looking shocked.
Yeah, he's like,
so funny.
I love it. I mean, I think that was everyone's reaction too. So
Yeah, literally,
I remember you texted me.
I don't think anyone was expecting the McLarens to be that fast this weekend.
Well, I was at the eye doctor while this was going on, so unfortunately my eyes were dilated and I was unable to tune in. But you texted me and you're like, Lando and Oscar, like P2, P3. I was like, you're lying. Like, I did not believe you. So that was pretty exciting.
Not April Fool's Day. It was real.
The last statistic that I think is important to throw out there is that this was Hamilton's 11th straight Silverstone podium.
Wow.
That's also impressive.
Yeah. His record at Silverstone, like I was saying, if it's going to be any race that Mercedes pulls out all the stops, it's Silverstone in the British Grand Prix. He just drives differently in front of that home crowd.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. I feel like it's a lot more pressure, but it's a lot more excitement too.
Yeah, there's a quote from I forget who it is. It's one of like the old drivers. It might be Senna, but he was basically saying that when you're driving in front of your home crowd, it gives you like an extra like 0.3 of time per lap. So there's definitely some truth, I think, to the fact that home crowd gives you more pace.
Unless you're Charles in Monaco.
Well, he's always fast, but
he just crashes sometimes.
Things are out of his hands.
Sure, we'll say that. All right, so what would you rate this race?
So this was definitely better than Austria, and I gave Austria an 8. I'm going to give this a 9.
Okay.
I think that honestly, as a McLaren fan, as a Lando fan, I was laughing and like smiling the entire race. I was so happy.
I was sitting there with my fingers crossed, like holding my breath. I was like, like, no way. And then honestly, I would agree. I would give this race a 9. I thought it was great. I think it was just unexpected, but in the best ways. So 9. Yeah. And I think there's some good battling going on as well. It was entertaining.
Yeah, it was good. It wasn't just a giant DRS train. There were battles kind of up and down the whole field. Overall, well done, Silverstone. I feel like it always produces a pretty good race.
Yeah, it's definitely one of my favorite races of the season, I would say.
Yeah, agreed, for sure. So, moving on to our predictions from the last episode. You said for the podium it would be Max P1, Charles P2, and Hamilton P3. So you got 2 out of 3, so you get 2 points.
Woo! Yeah, I mean, obviously Charles was a pipe dream there, but it's fine. I will take Lando P2. That's second best option. So
yeah, that Hamilton P3 was actually a really good call. I did not think it was going to happen.
I know you doubted me, and you're like, Checo would have to really mess up for him to not get podium, and I was like, he will, and he did. So
yeah, you called it. You were right on it.
Checo's
And
gonna
then
Checo.
that he does. See, maybe he just really likes overtaking, so he's like, I'm just not going to qualify well on purpose, so that way I can have a fun race.
Yeah,
He's
I don't
already
know.
given up that he's not going to beat Max, so he's like, I might as well have some fun.
And piss off Christian Horner in the meantime.
Yeah, definitely. And then for your crazy prediction for the race, you said there would be a red flag and 2 DNFs. Unfortunately, because of Lance Stroll, there were 3 DNFs and there was no red flags, so no points there.
But you could argue, like, I should have maybe said at least 2 DNFs, like half a point.
If you said at least, then maybe, but I don't think you said at least, so I'm gonna go with a big old 0 on that one.
I think you're gaslighting me right now, but I'll just girl boss and take it. Fine. All right, moving on to your predictions. You had Max P1, Checo P2, Charles P3. So you get 1 point, and obviously it's the giveaway point. So
Yeah,
throwing that
the
out
freebie.
there. Yeah, but you did say both McLarens would be in the top 8, and
So is that 2
talk
points?
about top 5. I don't know.
Both of them were in the top 8. I feel like that's a pretty good prediction there.
Yes and no. It's like I would give 1.5 points.
I mean,
so
you definitely.
like 2 points.
Most people did not think that these upgrades were as good as they were, but I had a feeling that they really were that good.
You did, but that could have just been like you rooting for your team and being excited.
As also, the stats guy,
we got a taste of their upgrades at the last race.
That's true. All right, I'll take 1 point, but I think it probably should have been 2. Maybe if I had done both McLarens in the top 5, I would not go down that easily.
Yeah, if it was top 5, I would give you 2 points. But top 8 is like,
still pretty good.
Not that hard,
but not amazing.
Yeah. We'll so we're tied.
All in all, we are tied with 3 points each.
We're
after
so
2 races. 2 races. Sorry.
All right. So we'll see. I feel like
we'll see after Hungary. We're gonna have to. I feel like we're both gonna have to start doing like crazy predictions to try to one up each other.
Spice it up. Honestly, I'd be down for that. I think, we'll see how this next race goes, and then if not, we'll just go crazy.
Yeah, if we're still tied after the next race, we're gonna have to do some crazy predictions.
All right, maybe we can start predicting like who's gonna be like last place.
Or if you do DNFs, who's gonna DNF?
Okay, that's really specific. But
yeah, we'll see.
Okay, we'll get there.
Something to think about.
So what was your favorite part about the race?
Well, I already mentioned it in my race recap, but Lando leading his home Grand Prix for 5 laps, and specifically when he overtook Max. So at the beginning on the broadcast, they kind of showed like a behind overhead. So, or actually no, it was the front view, what they usually do at the starts, but you couldn't see. Like, it looked like Lando got a good start, but it looked like Max did too. And then they switched to the overhead, and you saw Lando go ahead. And then the crowd went wild. Like, so every single person in that at that track screamed, I'm sure, at the top of their lungs. And I literally screen recorded it, went back and screen recorded it, because I just wanted to have that clip on my phone. But it's so electric.
It is. And that was a very cool moment. And for it to happen so literally the beginning of the race, it's like, what?
Yeah.
That's when you knew it was going to be a good race.
Yeah. And then also just a little shout out to Oscar that he did try to overtake Max for a little bit there on that first lap.
He did. He had some feisty moves in there, but unfortunately it didn't work out. But
good race from Lando and Oscar. McLaren's looking good.
Knock on wood. Hope it wasn't a fluke.
We'll get into it. I think it might be a little bit of a come back to earth thing next race, but we'll see. So, what was your moment of the race?
Definitely the fight between Lewis and Lando. I thought that was just great to watch, and I think it was like a nail biter because you're like, oh shit, like this is the end. Like Lando's no longer P2, but it was a really good battle. And even Lewis in the post race interview was just saying like he's such a good driver, and those McLarens are so fast. He was like, I just couldn't keep up, and I think you could just like hear the shock of like that McLaren was really fast. I think he has a soft spot for McLaren though. Obviously, I think he's just a supportive, great guy. So he was definitely really talking up McLaren and Lando, and I was like, this is melting my heart. But that was definitely, I think, one of the best parts of the race. It was just really nice to watch, and
Yeah, it was a great battle. And it was so weird. I've never seen this happen before in F1, but literally up and down the grid, everyone was like, holy shit, the McLaren is fast. Like, what the hell did they do to their car? Even like when George and Oscar were battling that first lap, kind of the same thing as what was happening with Lewis and Lando. George literally came over the radio and he said, that McLaren is a rocket ship on those hards. Like, he was genuinely shocked.
I mean, I think we all, like, what did they do to that car? Like, they went from driving a tractor into an F1 car in a matter of, like, 2 races.
Yeah, in race pace, I think they've improved by a second, which is crazy.
Holy shit. That's insane.
Yeah, it's basically like what Aston Martin did in the off-season, but they did it in season and completely jumped all of their other rivals. Not even rivals. They weren't even rivals with Mercedes, Ferrari, and Aston, but then now they're, for this race at least, they were very much the second fastest team.
Yeah, I'm curious to see with these upgrades and how Ferrari is just struggling. Like, who knows? They might be the one to watch a lot more. I think we all came into this season expecting a Red Bull Ferrari kind of duel, considering how the last season went, but it's definitely not going that way. And I think McLaren is definitely up there. I mean, one thing we're going to talk about too is like what the fuck is going on with Aston Martin and like where are they? So yeah. I'm excited to get into that portion of the stats and nerdy shit to figure that out.
Yeah, so we'll start with this, and then we can kind of talk about some of the other teams. So this chart here is showing from qualifying. It's Oscar, Lando, and Max's laps, their final laps, and where they were all the fastest car. So if you kind of combine Lando and Oscar, because they're driving the same car, so you can kind of get a comparison of the McLaren and the Red Bull, you'll see that in a lot of the corners, the McLaren actually is faster than the Red Bull. This whole season, the Red Bull has been like a monster in the straights. It's by far the fastest car. When DRS is on, like nobody is even close. So one of the things that a lot of teams were saying is, and even Lando and Oscar were saying, is that in the high speed, they're almost as good as Red Bull. And in some of like the medium speed corners, they might be the best car. It's their low speed, which is where they struggle. So I think this chart kind of shows that, you know, a lot of the corners, they're really competitive. And it's just, you know, they have to work on reducing their drag and improving the straight line speed, and then hopefully work on their low speed cornering. So that kind of goes back to what I was saying, where I think the next race might be an issue for them, because Hungary is a very has a lot of low speed corners. It's kind of like a Monaco without the walls is what a lot of people describe it as. So I have a feeling that they're going to be more competitive than they were without this upgrade package, but I think that they're probably going to be like the fifth fastest car for the next race, which is sad to say, but I think that's probably what's going to happen.
That makes sense with everything that you're saying. I mean, the Hungarian Grand Prix is not really one for a lot of overtaking. It's mostly like single line driving. So
very much like Monaco, where your qualifying is pretty much everything. If you don't qualify well, then you're pretty much just screwed. So that's going to be we'll see what Checo does. because
Right. Look at
this is going to be a track where if he qualifies poorly, he's not getting back up to the front for sure.
No, I don't think he'll be saving his ass this time around if that happens.
Yeah. So we can talk quickly about Aston Martin and kind of where they've been the last two races. So Austria and Silverstone are definitely different tracks, but they're pretty high speed. They have or Austria has maybe turn one is kind of medium speed, and then turn three is really the only low speed corner of the track. There's a lot of high speed, which is why McLaren was strong in there. And Silverstone is even more high speed. And this whole season, Aston Martin's biggest advantage over other teams was their low speed corners, and then they also had really good race pace and low tire degradation. So I think that with Austria and Silverstone being faster tracks, relatively speaking, Aston Martin dropped back a little bit, and I think there's a chance that we're going to see Aston Martin do a lot better at Hungary and potentially be the second or third fastest team.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
At least that's my theory. Because going into, I think after Bahrain and Jeddah, Alonso, people were asking oh, Alonso, do you think you're going to win a race? And he was like, yeah, maybe at Monaco, Singapore, or Hungary. Because he knew that their car is really good in the low speed corners and, low speed tracks. So it could see Alonso challenging for pole and a win again next week. Or not next week, in 2 weeks.
I'm curious to see how that goes. I was going to ask you if you thought they'd do better on this track, so thanks for explaining that.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see that, that's why without Max, this season would be so good, is that all these cars have very different characteristics. And even with McLaren now up there, we have 4 cars that are all can be the second fastest car given any weekend, depending on the characteristics of the track, is what it seems like. So
yeah,
we just need everyone to get up to Red Bull's speed, and then we might have a really great fight for the win. Maybe in 2024 we'll have 5 cars fighting for wins consistently.
Yeah, I don't know if I see that happening this year. Maybe next year. We'll see.
Yeah. I think that already a lot of teams are potentially starting to focus on 2024.
Yeah.
I know McLaren earlier in the season, they said that they're going to have this big upgrade package and then one more after the summer break. But I think recently Andrea Stella said that depending on how the season goes, they might move off of working on that second upgrade package and just start focusing on 2024. So I think a lot of teams are going to start doing that in hopes that next year they can be more competitive.
Yeah, I mean, you have to look at it in a very realistic way. I think everyone's pretty aware that they're not going to, for the most part, win. So it definitely makes more sense to pivot the focus onto next year and having a more competitive season next year, but also trying to obviously remain maybe P2, finish second and everything. But yeah, I think that's definitely a smarter way to go about it. I would do that if I had any say in anything.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because there's, Aston, Mercedes, Ferrari are all fighting for second in the constructors. So it's how much do they want that second, where if they stop developing, they might not get that second, but then they might be stronger next year. It's a lot of thinking these teams are doing, and, where they should put their resources towards development. So even though I don't think that anyone's going to challenge Red Bull consistently for the rest of the season, it'll be really interesting to see how the second place battle goes.
Yeah, we'll see. A lot of things changing. I mean, even just last race, a lot of things changed. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think that the good thing that teams are seeing about this McLaren upgrade is that it is possible for teams to find large chunks of time. So I think that teams are hopeful that they can eventually catch Red Bull.
I hope they have a lot of hopes and big dreams. That's all I have to say.
All right. Well, now that we're done with stats and nerdy shit, we're going to move on to meme of the week. Do you want to start us off?
Sure. So the first meme that I wanted to bring out here was this picture of Alex. He's posted on a guy holding I guess it's a Rottweiler on a chain and it's Ferrari because obviously, like, I don't think anyone expected a Williams to be in front of both Ferraris, but it was a competitive. I don't know what the hell happened to Ferrari. They just were unable to keep up. And Alex, I mean, good for him. Happy for him. He deserved it, but definitely made Ferrari his bitch. So good for him. But that was my meme. And then an honorary meme that just made me laugh a lot when I saw it was obviously there's some rumors going on that Shakira might potentially be dating Lewis Hamilton, and they're just rumors, but this tweet is a gif of a horse pulling a carriage, like sprinting, running super fast, and the caption is Lewis Hamilton when Shakira is on the paddock. And
that horse looks like it's going like 150 miles per hour.
That horse is faster than a Ferrari.
The last two times that Lewis has been on the podium, Shakira was at both races. Just saying.
No, I'm not saying she's his lucky charm, but he performs when she's there. So if you are a Mercedes and a Lewis fan, which, you know, if you're diehard, you better start writing to Shakira and make sure she's there. Because the statistics are there and he does perform better.
Yeah, I think it's one can maybe be lucky. 2 times that she's there and he gets a podium. I think it's time to start saying it's a trend.
If he wants to keep winning, he might have to marry her too.
Yeah, when he gets married to her, then he'll become the 8-time world champion.
Yeah. Maybe 9 too. Maybe we'll like up it. Every year that they're married, he gets another championship.
Yeah, back to Mercedes domination.
All right, on to yours, because this one was one of my favorites as well.
So this has been like a running thing the last few races that I've seen where someone like photoshops a podcast desk setup with mics and headsets into the cool down room, and it's called the Max Verstappen podcast, and it's just so funny because the Photoshop is really good. It looks like Lewis is even like working on a computer, and then it's like Lando's talking, and then they're both listening to Lando. It's literally like the perfect Photoshop. And the cool down room literally is the Max Verstappen podcast, because he's there every week and he just has different guests showing up. Like, it could be a McLaren, it could be a Ferrari, it could be Lewis, it could be the Aston. And it's got all these guest hosts coming on the show to talk about the race.
The first time that I saw that picture, it was just out of context, and I like scrolled past it, and then I came back and I was like, wait, they were never on a podcast together. I'm very confused. And I went back and I was like, the editing on this is amazing. And it's so funny. I love those memes of, on this week's episode of Max Podcast, the 2 starring guests are.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure like this meme came out like within an hour of the cool down room. So whoever made this like knocked it out of the park. It was super
They have to be
impressive.
Professional.
Yeah.
Definitely professional. That's like high level editing in Photoshop.
So I have an honorable mention for meme of the week. I'm not sure if you saw it, but after the race, there was a media person who was talking to Oscar and saying like, wow, like you guys overtook Alpine in the standings. And then he's kind of smirking like, yeah, it was a great performance. And then Alonso is just standing there in the background, just smiling. And it kind of just goes off like my meme from last week that Alonso was just so happy to see Alpine's downfall, and he's just continuing every race. He's probably so happy. Double DNF, McLaren's overtaking them, Oscar's doing better than them. It's just everything he could have wished for Alpine's downfall.
I didn't see that, but now I have to go look and find it, and that's hilarious. He's really in his villain era, and his target is Alpine.
Yeah. He just wants to see them fail so badly. It's so entertaining to watch.
He's like low-key the mastermind behind all of it. He's like sabotaging the cars and like making sure they don't They don't even make it out of the race.
It's all part of El Plan.
El Plan. That's a good one.
Right.
I guess moving on, because we skipped the controversy, but I think it's a good thing to note this whole drama going on with Cara Delevingne on the track. So if you want to take that one away.
Sure. So I don't know how much you've seen of it or if you watched the Sky pre-show for the races, but Martin Brundle always does a grid walk and usually tries to get an interview with some of the celebrities and guests that are also on the grid. And Cara Delevingne was there with Alfa Romeo. She was a guest of the team, and apparently she had been told by an F1 representative that she doesn't have to take any interview. She's allowed to say no. And that's what she did. Martin Brundle came up to her, tried to interview her, and she said no. And then he basically walked away and made a sassy remark. And everyone on the internet was going crazy. They were saying let kids who are idolizing these drivers go on the grid, only bring in celebrities that actually care. But the crazy thing is that, Cara was invited by Alfa Romeo. She's driven a Formula E car before. She knows racing and, Formula One and the different racing series. She's not just there for the attention and just trying to get attention from everyone. It's so crazy that people just can't let people be. And I think it's the big kind of fault, at least in my opinion, is that, Martin Brundle is trying to play up the drama. And I think it's happened, maybe not this season, but last season, there was someone he's trying to interview and the same thing happened. And he always does some sassy remark just to try to, I don't know if he actually believes that those people shouldn't be on the grid, but basically everyone was taking sides and getting feisty about it. And it was really just not worth all of the drama that's come out of it.
No, and I understand having a sarcastic remark to things because I'm a sarcastic person, and I believe what he said was, "Oh, I bet she had something interesting to say." I guess, which is rude for sure, but if he's just trying to make a joke about it, sure, there's other ways to go about it. I think it might have just been a big miscommunication. To be honest, I don't think he knew that she was instructed to not have to do interviews. So for him, he was almost without the context, you might look at her and be like, oh, she's so stuck up. Why wouldn't she just do a quick interview? But I agree. I think all this drama is always so silly. Let people live. I don't know. How would you feel if you had cameras in your face 24/7 and everything that you said to the press or to anyone could potentially be taken out of context? That's stressful. That's a lot of thinking before you speak. And I definitely don't do that. So I'd be saying no, thank you as well.
Yeah, all things considered, she handled it pretty well. I think she said no at first, and then she said no, and then on the third time she's like, "Oh, sorry, I can't hear you." She wasn't yelling at him or being sarcastic or saying anything snarky to him. She was just making it very clear that she wasn't going to do the interview. And
I think people should just focus. I think they should focus on their day jobs a little more and stop worrying about these silly little dramas going on, but that's just my opinion. Definitely blown out of proportion.
A lot of people think that F1's a reality TV show, so who knows?
It kind of is.
A little bit, but it's not only a reality TV show.
No, it's only a reality TV show when you just get personally invested in everyone's personal lives. That's when it becomes a reality show. But to be fair, they also do air a lot of that on DTS, so I guess a mix.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting that, Liberty Media bought F1 and they're definitely trying to grow it. And I think people love reality TV, so they definitely lean into it in some ways and rubs people the wrong way. But
for sure.
I'm a fan of it. I got into it partially because of DTS, so I'm not complaining.
I'm definitely someone that enjoys knowing more about people and their lives and their backgrounds. So for me, I feel more connected to a sport or athletes if I know more of their background, where they came from, their attitude, etc. I just think it's like putting a bit of humanity into someone and not just being like, oh, this professional driver, and you idolize them, of course, like you're still going to be a fan or whatnot, but I think it helps make them seem more human when you have all of that like background.
Yeah, when you can kind of lean into and understand the human side of it, and like we both have our favorite drivers, it definitely makes you more invested. If I wasn't as huge of a Lando fan, I don't know if I would be as invested. So
yeah,
it's just how it is.
The way she goes. So obviously the driver highlight are the best driver on the grid this past weekend. No doubt, Brad Pitt.
or Sonny Hayes, as he is going to be in the F1 movie that he is starring in. So it's pretty crazy to see how like involved they were with the race weekend, and really they had two F2 cars that were in F1-esque, chassis that were actually on the track driving between sessions.
I'm curious because I saw snippets of them recording Brad like walking, and I think it was like Carlos in the background, and I'm curious if the actual drivers are going to be in the movie, like just as background people by just because they're filming. I'm curious to see how it turns out.
I think that the drivers are basically just going to be extras in the movie. They're not. I don't think they're going to have any. Maybe Lewis might, because apparently Lewis is helping write the script or consult on the script. So maybe they'll give him a cameo or something like that. But I think for the most part, a lot of the stuff that they're filming is meant to just have other F1 cars and drivers in the background, just to give it a little bit of validity and make it look more authentic. But it's really impressive. They even go ahead.
Sorry, our mics I think are lagging. I was going to say, do you know when that movie is expected to come out?
I don't. I would probably say like 2025, because I mean they're going to be recording this whole season. I think there's plans for them to show up to a couple other races this season and do more filming. I think even at Hungary in 2 weeks they're going to be doing more filming. Probably 2020, late 2024, 2025, something like that. If I had to guess, not that I'm an expert on film making by any means.
I would say that's a fair guess. We'll just have to patiently wait to see Sonny Hayes.
Yeah, but it was really cool. I mean, they even had a full garage and hospitality set up in the paddock, which was so cool. And they had access to live telemetry on their screens in the pit. And some of the drivers, I think Lando even commented saying, wow, they have a nicer garage than we do. And I think Fred Vasseur said something similar. It was it was really cool to see. And I think that before this weekend, there were a lot of rumors that, they would be racing during the Grand Prix, or they would be leading the formation lap. None of that ended up happening. It was they did it in a non-intrusive way. I think they filmed a lot in between practice sessions, and then they were at the back of the formation lap. So they kind of just took off with the teams, and then they just quickly went to an escape road, and it was no safety concern or anything like that. I think that was the biggest thing, that they were concerned there would be inexperienced drivers driving F2 cars when F1 cars are driving. But I think the way they did it was tasteful, I think.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's a big concern, and you don't want anything to happen to the drivers or the actors, whoever is, driving it, but it's interesting. It's definitely cool. It's a nice little added detail to race weekends. But yeah, I'm glad he. I'm actually surprised he didn't win Driver of the Day, but
that would have been funny if there was he actually an option.
No.
I didn't. Okay, I forgot to do my F1 Driver of the Day vote, but that would have been funny if they made him an option, just because. They could have had broadcast footage of Sonny Hayes, Driver of the Day.
They should have done it as a joke, and then whatever.
They also could very easily just edit that into the film later. I'm sure.
True.
Actually, that maybe they'll do that. Like he has a shock win, and then he's voted driver of the day, and they just edit over some broadcast footage or something.
We'll have to watch. We'll have to watch the movie to see.
Gonna be there for opening night for sure.
Perfect.
All right. So, do you have a driver highlight for this week?
Well, it wasn't really a highlight, but I think alluding into the next race, a moment in a post-race interview with Lando, Hamilton, and Max. Lando made kind of, not a snarky comment, but a funny comment about Lewis and Alonso's great teammate relationship when they were both teammates on McLaren. And it was great to see both Max and Lewis laughing at that because they often don't laugh at the same things. So I thought that was a funny response. And it's in time for the Hungarian Grand Prix because that's essentially where the feud started between the two in 2007 with the whole the pit stop and Alonso making sure, or I guess like stopping and halting Lewis from getting out of the pit lane and that whole feud that started. So I thought it was a funny little moment to look back on and laugh at. All right, so going into the Hungarian Grand Prix, what are your predictions?
So I think this is kind of going off of what I was saying earlier, but obviously we start with Max P1 because that's the freebie. Yeah. I'm going to go with Alonso in P2. And then I know this is kind of going against what I was saying earlier, but this is me being a little bit biased towards Lando. I don't really think this is going to happen, but I want to do something different from your predictions. So I'm going to go Lando P3, 2 podiums in a row. Even though their car isn't great in low speed, I think Lando really likes Hungary. He likes, Monaco. So I think he's going to pull something out of the bag, and I think he could have a chance for a podium here. And then my crazy prediction, which I'm sure you're going to love, is that Charles and Carlos are in a fight on track, and one of them is going to get damaged because of it.
Don't love that one. Could see it happening.
They've been feisty the last couple races.
They have been. I think they're both definitely frustrated for many of the same but different reasons. So I could see that happening. I hope not. I feel like they've had a great teammate relationship for the most part.
I mean, it seems like when they're not dealing with Ferrari antics, they get along well. But I think Carlos feels that he's been faster than Charles the last few races, and it hasn't really shown. So it seems like he's getting frustrated.
I mean, I would be too, right? Like, you have to sacrifice your position because you're not primary driver, even though they technically don't have one. But we can see with their strategy that they do. I get it. I'd be frustrated as well. And, I think he just doesn't feel as valued either. There's been like a few statements that he's made in the past that he's like, oh, everyone's happy when Charles is in front or something along those lines. So I get it.
Yeah, I feel like he can definitely feel that most Ferrari fans like Charles better than him. And I feel like he desperately wants to be the first driver, but it's just not going to happen for him at Ferrari.
Yeah, I'm curious to see, with his contract coming up next year, if, he's going to go for that first driver spot somewhere else, and where would that be? Or if he's going to, if it's mutual, of course, stick with Ferrari, because I feel like I'd be shocked if they got rid of Charles. That's their golden boy, but You never know. Silly season be silly.
It's gonna silly for sure. So those are my predictions. Let's hear yours.
Okay, so I feel like I learned a lot in terms of the Aston Martin car being better on some of these slower tracks, but I'm not going to change my predictions. Right. But this was new information, so I'll have to keep that in mind. So, of course, P1, I have Max. P2, I have Checo. And we'll get into why. We'll get into why after. And then P3, I just threw in Hamilton again. I feel like it's a safe podium.
Do you have inside information that Shakira's going to be there or something?
I think I'm like keeping my fingers crossed. Hopefully she's on. Maybe she has like a secret performance going on.
That should be your crazy prediction, that Shakira is performing at the Hungarian Grand Prix.
Honestly, let me look into some more information and I make that statement. But no, my crazy prediction is that Checo will make it to Q3. And he'll do well. I think because he knows that the pressure's really on, that like if he fucks up in qualifying, he's done. I think he'll make it to Q3. And I think he'll do well.
I'll allow it, but he really is in such a dominant car that it shouldn't be a crazy prediction.
Well, it's been 5 in a row that he hasn't made it.
That's why I'll allow it, because it has been the norm that he doesn't make it, but he absolutely should be. So
okay. I'll make like a secondary prediction that Shakira will be there.
Okay.
Maybe that'll spice things up as well. But
all right, well,
those are my predictions.
It seems like we got a little bit of different predictions this time, so we'll see what happens. Maybe one of us will actually take the lead, or maybe we'll both only get Max right and we'll still be tied.
Imagine. I mean, hey, I kind of expect that at this point.
Yeah, I mean, besides Max, we both have the other 4 spots or the other 2 spots are different for us. So 4 different drivers that we have up there for the podium spots.
Maybe we'll see a Haas on the podium.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if they have a massive upgrade, we'll see what happens.
No upgrades, they're just making it on the podium. That's all.
Hulkenberg gonna pull out something wild again.
That's gonna be my crazy prediction. Just kidding. All right.
Time for everybody's favorite segment, Hinge Pickup Line of the Week.
Yeah, so we did 2. I feel like they're not super duper crazy. The first one's a little boring, bland, but whatever. This guy said, Sunday is race day, but you can be mine every day.
Okay. I mean, I feel like the race day could be a fill in the blank with pretty much anything.
Agreed.
So they tried.
Yeah, not impressed. What would you rate it?
I don't know. I'd give that like a 2 or a 3. It's not doing it for me. Yeah,
it didn't really work. I mean, it's cool, I guess, but I think it's like one of those pickup lines where they don't really watch Formula One.
Yeah.
But
and it's also not even specific to F1. It could be any other racing series, or
like game days, Sundays.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that wasn't really a good one. But then, of course, this next one. I won't fail you like Ferrari fails Leclerc.
Now that one is close to the heart. That one's a good one.
Yeah, so obviously when I got that, I was not happy.
Did this person know that you're a Charles fan?
So the only way that anyone would know that I'm a Charles fan based on my bio is if they really scrolled, or not my bio, my profile, is you can link your Instagram. And the only thing that gives a hint that I'm a Ferrari fan is way back when in Halloween when I wore my Ferrari jacket. There's one picture in the middle of a scroll. Some people have seen it. Some people do the dirty digging. But that's it. So I don't know that he knew. Well,
I think that at least shows that he knows what's going on with F1.
Yeah.
So, and I like that it is close to heart to you. So I'm gonna give that one a 10. I'm a big fan of that one.
If I wasn't upset about it being true, I'll give it a 9.5.
Okay, docking in 0.5 for shitting on Ferrari.
But it's true. At least we're very self-aware. But it hurt. But at least you know what? He promised to not do me as dirty as Ferrari does. So I guess it's only the positive there. And just 2 for this week. But there'll be some good ones. We've got them brewing.
Yeah, I like the one bad one good one. Definitely a good balance.
We'll keep it going as long as, like I said, I remain single. All right. Well. Thanks, y'all.
That's gas.
That's gas. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks.
Yeah, make sure to check out our socials, Instagram and TikTok. We'll be posting all the way up until the Hungarian Grand Prix, and we'll catch you later.
Peace out, y'all.
See ya.